Jesus is the answer for the world today.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to welcome you back to another week of 30 Saturdays through the Bible, our conjunction devotional with our family devotional that's on our website, cpc900/kidmin, for our families, 30 Sundays through the Bible. We have been going through the Bible from the beginning, and we've been learning about God's bigger story that he has in scripture. And today we're going to continue learning about the children of Israel. Last week we learned about how God gave them his 10 commandments. He gave them his laws that he wanted them to live by. Today, we're going to hear a very interesting story. And this story can be found in Numbers chapter 13. And I want to encourage you to also read chapter 14, just so you can get a robust understanding of what happened here. So a little bit of background, right? All the way back to Abraham. Remember where we talked about Abraham, and God had called Abraham, and Abraham obeyed, and God said, Abraham, I'm going to give you this land. Right? And I'm going to make your descendants as large as the sands and as large as the stars in the sky. Right? And all of that happens with Isaac and the sacrifice. And then, of course, Joseph, and then Egypt. And God delivers the children out of Egypt. So as they've been passing through the desert, they've come up to the promised land. And so God comes to Moses in Numbers chapter 13, verse 1. And the scripture tells us in verse 1 and 2, the Lord said to Moses, send men to explore the land of Canaan. I will give that land to the Israelites. Send one leader from each tribe. So Moses does just that. He gets a leader from each tribe of Israel, and he tells them, hey, go and spy out the land. And so they do just that. They go into the land for 40 days and they look. And Moses gives them explicit instructions. He tells them to find out like how many people are there. Is the land good to live in? Is the soil fertile, or is it poor? He tells them, try to bring back some of the fruits of the land. He says, find out if there are cities there, if there are walls, if there are people that live there. And the spies, they go ahead and they do that. And they come back to Moses and they give him a report. And the Bible tells us in Numbers verse 27, I was looking for it, of chapter 13, they told Moses, we went to the land where you sent us. It is a land where much food grows. Here is some of its fruit. But the people who live there are strong. Their cities are walled and large. We even saw some Anakites there. The Amalekites live in the southern area. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the mountains. The Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan River. Then Caleb told the people near Moses to be quiet. Caleb said, we should go up and take the land for ourselves. We can do it. But the scripture goes on to tell us that the rest of the spies were like, no, Caleb, we saw giants in there. There's no way we can do this. There's no way we can overcome. And they didn't just stay there in their report to Moses, but they went throughout the whole camp. And they began to tell the Israelites this bad report about the land, that they can't take it, that will be overcome. So the Israelites began to complain, and they said things like this to Moses and Aaron. We should have died in Egypt, or we should have died in the desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land? We will be killed with swords. Our wives and children will be taken away. We would be better off going back to Egypt. And as all of this is going on, all this commotion in the camp, Caleb and Joshua, who were two spies that went out with the original 10, are like, guys, what are we saying? They go on to say in chapter 14, they say, the land we went to explore is very good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into the land. He will give us that land where much food grows. Don't turn against the Lord. Don't be afraid of the people in that land. We will chew them up. They have no protection, but we have the Lord. So don't be afraid of them. This is what Caleb and Joshua were telling to the children of Israel. And You would think that when they hear those inspiring and encouraging words that they would be like, yeah, Joshua, here, Caleb, you are right. God who delivered us out of Egypt can surely deliver this land that he promised to us. But no, the exact opposite happened. The children of Israel continue to complain. They continue to have no faith in God, and they continue to move in fear, to the point that God comes and says this. God laments before Moses, and he says in chapter 14, verse 11, the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people ignore me? How long will it be before they believe me? I have done miracles among them. You know, I want us to take a moment and ask ourselves if we have been in situations where we are like the children of Israel. Like I said, I want to encourage you to continue to read the story, because after God hears the complaint of the children of Israel, and this was not the first time they had complained, nor was it the first, second, third, or fourth time that they have uttered the words from their heart, that it would have been better if we were in Egypt. Don't forget that in Egypt, they were suffering under hard labor in slavery. And God had this amazing promise that he wanted to take them to a land flowing with milk and honey. But because it didn't immediately look easy, because there were a little bit of obstacles in the way, because they believed the report of other people instead of believing a godly report, they displeased God. They sinned against God in not believing that God was more than able to deliver them. They sinned against God by not putting their trust in God. They sinned against God by not remembering God's faithfulness to them. The fact that he fed them in the desert, the fact that he delivered them from the Egyptian army, the fact that he covered them with the cloud during the day and a fire by night, that he split the Red Sea. They sinned against God. And what about us? Do we do the same thing that the children of Israel are doing? When God gives us a promise, when God gives us a word, instead of holding on to his word and looking at God, we begin to look at ourselves and our abilities. And you know, the truth is that when we look at our abilities, when we look at our capabilities, it will never match up to what God is calling us to do. But if we put our trust in the Lord and we let our securities be in him, then we can overcome. The Bible tells us in Philippians 4:13, you and I, we can do all things, not everything. Not some things, not a little bit of things, but everything through God who gives us strength. The Bible also tells us in 1 John chapter 4, verse 19, it says that there is no fear in perfect love, for perfect love casts out all fear, because fear torments. The children of Israel were right on the cusp of their breakthrough, right on the cusp of their deliverance. But because they allowed what they saw to rise fear in their hearts, they didn't believe in God. So I want to encourage us today. Like I said, read the story, because they didn't believe God. God said, you know what? This generation is not going to enter the promised land. And God said, for every single day that those spies explored the land, they saw how good it was, but they still came and brought a bad report. I'm going to have this generation wander in the desert. And because they're going to wander in the desert for 40 days, their children are going to suffer, and their children's children are going to suffer. And you know, as I was reading this, you know, it just convicted my heart to understand that my trust and my obedience to God doesn't only affect my immediate lifetime, but it affects my generations. And I want to say the same thing to everyone out there that's listening, that your decisions, your trust in God or your lack thereof, your obedience to God or your lack thereof, it is not just for your lifetime, but it is for your generations. We serve a faithful and powerful God. I want to encourage you, as I'm encouraging myself, to not forget the goodness of God in our lives, to not forget what he has brought us through, to not be like this generation of the children of Israel, but let's trust God no matter what it looks like. Let's remember that he is a God of miracles. He's a God of wonders. He's the Almighty, and where he has brought us through and from in the past, whatever is in front of us, no matter how big or small, complicated, easy or hard, God is surely to deliver us if we put our trust in him and our dependency in him. We will taste his good for us. So be encouraged and know to trust God no matter what it looks like. God bless you.